So we're going to go straight to Jeanne Sarson and Linda MacDonald, and they are co-founders of Persons Against Non-State Torture. They're feminist activists, independent scholars with many published works, and grassroots supporters of women who have survived non-state torture and sexualized exploitation perpetrated within intimate relationships. So we're going to hear from them today about the work that they've been doing, and the link also to the declaration, why they signed the declaration, why they've spoken out on this issue, which is not exactly their core work, but is related. So very, very welcome, Linda and Jeanne, and whoever one of you speaks, you'll be on screen.
Okay, thanks, Joe. Well, I'll start. I'm Linda. And Jeanne and I'll share why we signed the declaration, and then we'll share the presentation. So I'll explain that Jeanne and I started this work in 1993, and we're nurses who started working with one woman who was tortured by her family. And 28 years later, we've listened to thousands of women all around the world that are tortured by family or in prostitution and human trafficking and pornography. And the CSW put out a feminist statement in March, and I was really appalled by it because the word woman wasn't hardly even in the declaration, in the statement anywhere. And one late night, one of my late night rants searches on the internet, I found the declaration, and I was so thrilled to find it because I thought, well, that's the opposite of what the UN CSW was saying. So I contacted Jeanne, and we both signed the declaration. Because for me, the women that we've worked with have been so invisibilized over the centuries that have been tortured, to think that the word woman will be invisibilized before they're even visible, it was just too much of a violation for me to cope with.
I was just going to expand when Linda called about her, like she said, her late night rant over looking over the internet to see what was happening all around the world, and how distressful it is for us to see the fact that women, the word woman, women, girls is being invisibilized. And I was thinking of many things, actually, including my mother, and including the politics of Canada. For those of you may know or may not know that in 1926, 1929, women went to the UK to argue before the Privy Council that they should be able to sit as persons in our Senate. So they were women who gained that right. And I'm upset to think that we could just kind of invisibilize the historical efforts that women have taken. And the reason I relate it to my mother is my mother was a victim of domestic violence, and how hard she had to work to exit that relationship as a woman and live in the world as a woman. And I'm just not willing to let go of that reality that I am a woman, she was a woman, and all the women before us. And like Linda said, our work for 28 years has been with women, and women who told us they didn't even know they were persons. They perceived themselves as it, or a thing, or as nothing. And it is impossible for me to let them disappear in the fact that they shouldn't or couldn't be respected to use the word woman. So that connected me to the declaration, especially to the Article 8 in the declaration, and including Article 4, the freedom to have a voice. And when we worked with the women, they had no voice. Torturers don't give those they torture a voice. So it was intimate to me, because I've read the Declaration quite a few times, and I related to those two articles especially, and to the others, but these in the work that Linda and I do. And I wanted to say something about CEDAW. When Linda and I went to CEDAW in 2008 for the first time and took the issue of non-state torture to CEDAW, the expert panelists, which were mostly women, they were struggling themselves. And they even told us that it was threatening for them to even support our request that we were asking that they would ask Canada to create a law that would acknowledge non-state torture of women in the private sphere. So it's important also then to support the declaration in the fact that it is related to CEDAW. So thank you. Thank you for the declaration.
Yes, thank you very much for the hard work of the declaration. So now we're honored to be part of this. So here we are, Jeanne and I, screaming, breaking through the wall of silence that women and girls have endured for, like I say, centuries. It's really a sham that women and girls do not endure torture. And most times it's minimized to assault or aggravated assault, and or domestic violence. And domestic violence is torture is one form of domestic violence, but it includes other forms, like I said, in prostitution, pornography, and human trafficking. So we've refused to be silent. We coined the term non-state torture back in 2004. We called it non-political before then and realized that wasn't the right term, and met with feminists in the United Nations, and they told us about the amnesty term, non-state actor. We don't really like amnesty because they don't even recognize the non-state torture of women, but we took their term non-state actor and then added non-state torture. You'd think that amnesty would have thought of non-state torture, but they didn't. Jeanne and I did. So we're been silenced for many years in many ways, and we're finally now feeling at the place that enough feminists are hearing us, because we've listened to so many women that, like Jeanne said, they really didn't even know they were persons, let alone women. And Jeanne wrote a blog. It's in the chat about the patriarchal silencing of non-state torture war, and we do believe it is a war. If you look at all the millions of women really around the world, women and girls who have endured non-state torture, it's really quite shocking to think that they've really still, most organizations consider state torture much more prevalent. And when they talk about state torture, it's primarily talking about men in warring, men as prisoners of war, men in embassies, men tortured by the police. And yet we have these millions of women. If you look at 1/3 of the world's women and girls suffer physical and sexualized violence. Well, we've learned that non-state torture is a form of that sexualized violence in families. And child brides, 650 million under the age of 18. All those little children being forcibly raped as child brides. And 15.4 million forced marriages, non-consented. Then you have FGM, which is recognized as a form of non-state torture by the United Nations, 200 million of those. Prostituted women who come to us and describe the prostitution torture that they've endured. We were just talking to a woman from Italy yesterday, and she listed off all the different things like caging, shackling, electric shocking, gang rape, forced abortions. Those are all forms of torture that we hear about in all the different areas of relationships. Pornography. It's not, we have, how many women are involved in pornography? Millions. So you can only imagine how many are enduring the torture porn. 40 widow rituals, 40 million in 2012. Acid burning, 80% of the women of the acid burning is women, and that's 1,500 yearly. 71% of women and girls are involved, or the slavery are women and girls, and Slavery is a form of torture. You can see what I was talking about. And this is, you can see all the different forms that I was talking about here. The FGM, child brides, acid burning. We've been talking to a friend, Lily, in Papua New Guinea around sorcery or witch hunt torture, 1,000 a year, Oxfam identifies. The Canadian Centre for Child Protection in our country documents that there's newborns to 8-year-olds endure torture in pornography. There's 1 million children involved in sexualized exploitation in 2016. That's 1 million children. I mean, it's horrendous. And forced labor, many women in forced labor are tortured. So if we start to think of all around the world, the millions of women who've been tortured, and I'm talking about caging, shackling, electric shocking, forced drugging, all the things that we recognize for state torture, and we're calling it assault or abuse or aggravated assault in our laws in our countries. Really, the torture of women and girls is totally invisibilized. And that's the premise of our work.
This is my turn, and I just wanted to say, for us to get here to look at the world globally and how much torture is going on against women and girls, and as feminists, that we're almost missing it. We're almost missing it in the fact that it seems that we're all trying to do our part. And as we do one part, we end up kind of missing the collective. So that's why I wrote the blog. I was just getting so upset that patriarchy was able to kind of petition us off and have us look at one form of violence. One group would look at one form, another group would look at another form. And yet collectively, we were talking as feminists, but not seeing the total degree of victimization, especially in the work that we were doing. Because even though we started where Linda said with the first woman who came to us, it was that she was born into a family that tortured her from infancy. And she was almost 30 and she was still being tortured and trafficked. And that was her norm. It took many years for her to understand why she was suffering. She thought she had job stress, actually, because of course she had normalized the non-state torture because she had to from an infant. She had to bond with her torturers, that they were the only adults in her life. So what happened briefly is to say that even though we started there, and of course, every time we spoke in 1993, and for quite a few years, we were considered crazy to be even suggesting that women were tortured in the private sphere. And the UN kept evolving, and it was 15 years actually before the Committee Against Torture in 2008. In their general comment number 2 in paragraph 18, if you're looking at it, they made a distinction that torture does happen in the private sphere by non-state actors. So when that came, what happened there is that special rapporteurs on torture at the UN level, there were resolutions that asked them to include women and children in their reports that had been tortured by non-state actors. So when that happened, Linda and I started looking at a broader global sense, and that's where the FGM and child marriage and all the other forms of victimization came in, because what we started with was relationship, non-state torture, and family. Then we went to the commercial, which was the prostitution, the human trafficking, the pornographic non-state torture, and including labor, women who were domestic laborers who were tortured by their employers. And there were examples coming up in the press. And then what the UN Special Rapporteurs did, they started looking at FGM to look at it from, okay, this happens to girls and to women specifically. Same as child marriage. The child marriage, that you can have a combination. A young girl we have, Sarah, in the news, she was 12 as a child bride. By the time she was 16, her so-called husband and his family were torturing her. They burnt her with hot irons, pulled her nails out, put her in the basement for 6 months, starved her, pulled her hair out. So you get combinations. So that kind of drove us that we have to look globally. So that's how that patriarchal non-state torture war came about emotionally and cognitively in writing the blog. And in your Article 8 of the Declaration, you talk about the need that we have to represent and respect that women who are victimized need special services. And that's exactly true. And that's what this slide is that in helping women heal around the non-state torture, victimization, traumatization, informed care. And we're very specific about this because often what we hear is trauma-informed care. And often trauma-informed care tells women not to tell about their victimization. And it's like another way to invisibilize the harm that women and girls survive. Some of them do not survive, actually, probably many. So we're very insistent that we have to recognize their victimization, because if you don't recognize their victimization, how are you even going to understand that we need a law in order that for them to name the victimization that they have suffered, in this case, torture by non-state actors. So it was like a 3-step process for us. The fact that we named it, which acknowledges what the women have endured. The fact that it names her victimization, it gives her the right to say, I suffered a crime, and the crime I suffered was perpetrated by others. It helps her not to blame herself that I was tortured. And it promotes the fact that globally at a UN level, when they work with individuals who have been state tortured, it's understood that the global standard is they have to tell about their victimization. And that's exactly what Linda and I have learned over the 28 years, starting with the first woman. She came to tell her story, even though she didn't see it as torture. It took her a little while before she named it. We didn't name it until she was able to name it herself without any promotion from us. She just started automatically calling it torture. And that's what we have found with other women too. They come and they say, I was tortured. And we have a questionnaire that lists the forms of torture. And we get feedback from women who say, I'm so thankful to see the questionnaire, because so often people say, well, it was torture, but they don't tell me what torture was. So when I do the questionnaire, there's 48 points on it. It tells me what I suffered. It tells me how hard I've had to work to recover. It tells me about my triggering. It tells me about who I am and how I am in the world today. So it's very important to have a voice. And for us, that's what the Declaration does. It gives women a voice. And the last point in it was women have come and said, okay, I was told I had a post-traumatic stress disorder. I don't know how you feel, but for Linda and I, we totally disagree. What do we expect of a woman or a girl who has been tortured? Like, what do we expect how they survive? They had to survive. They had to develop ways of surviving. So we call it post-traumatic stress response. They have responses to the victimization, to the crime that they suffered. So this is the framework that's in our book. This is our stance around the human right of women to speak their truth. So the next slide, Linda. Way back in 1991, I was doing my master's program and studying feminist work. And to try to understand patriarchy, I developed this model, and it has been really successful in helping us help women who have come to us, who were told over and over and over again that it was their fault, that they deserved what they were getting, that the torture was punishment. Torture, women and girls who are tortured, it's not punishment, it's a crime. So for them to understand that globally we have a patriarchal society, and the power all rests in the politics of a country and the religious structures, which is in the non-state torture war, the fact that religious structures like FGM, child marriage, those are really promoted from religious beliefs, or I guess you could say customs, traditions. So there's power in religious structures too, and the fact that families historically were often male dominated. You know, even today, men decide whether women could leave the house, who they can leave the house with, whether they can have a job, those kind of relational connections. And it influences women's economic wealth. And if you have economic wealth, we know that men carried economic wealth. So the fundamental patriarchal principle that we help women understand that it's not their fault that they're a female person, a woman or a girl, that they have a vagina, that they have breasts, that is what's defining them to be subordinate, and that the fundamental patriarchal principle around domination, power, and control for men, and subordination and oppression is where women and girls fit in a patriarchal society. And how this shapes these beliefs, so-called, this principle shapes a culture in so many ways, and how structures then take that culture and make it into policies and practices, and it goes right down to our individual relationships. And if that's how we're all conditioned, we're never going to have universal human rights equality for women and girls. So that's the other reason for us being thrilled to sign the Declaration, because the Universal Declaration of Human Rights says that no one shall be subjected to torture. That's Article 5. But that was 1948 when the Universal Declaration was put out, and before CEDAW. And it was operationalized only for men and war as a human right. And it has never been operationalized for women and girls as a human right. And like I said, CEDAW, even when we went to CEDAW, the female experts on CEDAW were really hesitant. And that was in 2008. And then it went again, I think in 2015. And even though the experts told Canada that Canada should amend their law, Canada has refused to do so. And Linda and I have gone to the Committee Against Torture to try to push our country. We went in 2012 and we had a lot of support, and the Committee Against Torture did say to Canada, we suggest that you change the law in Canada so that torture by non-state actors would be a crime. Canada said that's a soft law recommendation and would not do it. And then we went again in 2018 and they just about threw us out of the room because it was a whole different panel and a different chair. And they were very patriarchal and said that the Convention Against Torture only applied to state actors. So that's some of the background that brought us to emotionally connect with the declaration. And again, I thank you, Joe, and thank everyone that you're working with for all the work that you're doing and for having us. Thank you.
We wrote a book and it'll be out in October. So we don't have any links for how to pre-sale or anything yet, but I put our links in the chat of our website if anybody's interested in the book, because it has a lot of women's stories in it from all around the world and our story too. So it's called Women Unsilenced. So that's why the word woman is so important to us. Women Unsilenced, our refusal to let torturer traffickers win. Thank you so much.
Have you done all this work on your own, and have you been funded? And have you had support from organizations over this last 20 years or more that you've been doing the work? Is it 30 years? Sort of how have you managed to organize all this and do this fantastic work?
Well, we started ourselves, the two of us, and Persons Against Non-State Torture is still the two of us. And we have no funding. We had two malicious complaints against us in the early 90s. And we decided every time we applied for funding, we had to have a board. We were worried about infiltration in a board, that people would get in and try to stop us because we were challenging very powerful perpetrators, not naming them, but they knew we knew what they were doing. So we decided then not to take funding, but that if we did, it would silence our voice and we wouldn't be able to get the truth out. We've had sometimes funding, like a few organizations have given us money to do training, but 98% of our work has been self-funded. We're both retired now, but we worked full time and did this. We were working, we still work 7 days a week, but we have had some organizations that support us, like the London Abused Women's Center. We did some training with their staff, and they're the only center in the world that we know of that have taken our training and do the work that we taught them to do around supporting women who've been tortured. And we've had some feminists who have supported us, but we've had a lot of people try to block us and discredit us, and feminists as well along the way. So we're just kind of surfacing after a long ordeal.
Wow. And how about you, Jeanne? What's it been like working on this for such a long time?
Well, you have to know we're working in patriarchy. So, you're up against the wall every step of the way. Yeah, it's been difficult. Initially, how we started, like our background is public health nursing. So, of course, sex anatomically and biologically is important because it's critical to how you care. So how it started, just to give a little more feedback, is that we were both born into family violence. So that was our background. Linda had an attempt she had a sexual assault. I had a sexual assault as a 5-year-old. And it was so upsetting because in public health, there's a lot of literature that says violence against women and girls is a major public health issue. So it was a major public health issue, personally and socially and professionally. So we were so upset that we saw over and over again women who were reporting violence were being pathologized over and over again. And it really started with me as an 8-year-old when my mother was seeking support, and because she had depressiveness, and what they did, the medical system gave her an insulin shock therapy, mistreatment, if you will. So as a young girl, it just made no sense. So in nursing, it didn't make any sense. So Linda and I said, you know, enough of this pathology. We'll start one evening a week to offer people who came, who identified clearly as the issue is violence. Violence, it's a crime, you know, that didn't seem to be a big issue, but in patriarchy, it is a big issue. Because it makes money. It makes money in the business of psychiatry, if you will, you know, in drug companies where you can drug people so they can't remember anything, or they become emotionally disconnected. So we started one evening a week, and 6 months into it, Sarah came. That's not her real name. That's the name she chose. And it changed our life forever, and it has continued to change our life forever, because I went into it knowing about sexualized violence and knowing about the sexism that my mother experienced, watching the issues that she was confronted with as a woman who left her husband in a society that you didn't do that. And when Sarah came, it just kind of blew us both out of the water in many ways, because we were naive. We did not know that torture happened. There was nothing in the literature. There was nothing that we could find anywhere to support her, and we decided not to abandon her. She was highly suicidal and did not understand, and just we ended up going underground, Joe, because the system would not have supported her or supported us in what we were doing to care about her. So it changed our lives, it changed our family lives. So every day I look at the world with a bifocal look. Every day I know that patriarchy is in front of me in very different ways, and in this case around the discrimination in the fact that women aren't allowed, if you will, legally in most countries on this planet to talk about the torture.
You've explained your work, which is fantastic, and you've shared some of your fantastic insights and your PowerPoint. And I think your video will share very, really widely, because it's such important work. And you've also engaged with the United Nations and with states, asking them, and organizations, asking them to take this on board. Can you tell us what you think has been happening? Have things got worse for women? And then, in terms of taking on board some of these problems that, well, this torture, but also, can you link it a little bit to transgenderism? Like, what do you see happening if transgender ideology comes into force? What's going to happen to your work and the non-state torture?
Our work is affected the same as everyone's work. The backlash is here. And every time we try to bring our work to the United Nations, we're getting more misogyny. And when we try to bring it up with the Commission on the Status of Women, the trans issue comes forward. And when we talk about torture and prostitution, then there's the argument about sex work, and our work is not valued because we're talking about prostitution. And we were on a panel at the Beijing Plus 25, a working group where I facilitated a fact sheet on non-state torture, and that wasn't even allowed to be brought forward with all the other fact sheets. It was put aside. People, feminist activists told us that women in Europe wouldn't understand the term non-state torture, which was ludicrous, that we were not focusing enough on women in Europe, and yet we were talking about women all around the world. There was many different ways to try to silence our work. And I just think it's the same as any of our work. It's becoming put on the back burner. And that's why that feminist statement finally did it for me.
Everything that Linda said, I agree with. What I would add there is what it's done for me. I had to reframe politics not only as being patriarchal with misogyny, but in Canada, because we've talked to ministers at all levels, local and national, and I've had to come and frame that in Canada, our politics involves political cruelty. I never would have had that term before, that I would look at politics, because Linda and I have gone and given testimony to standing committees of the House of Commons on the issue, say, on human trafficking and non-state torture. And when they put out their report, they excluded everything that we had said. And when I challenged why they did that, we were told that a standing committee of the House of Commons has the right to decide what they put in their report or what they don't put in the report. So automatically, there's a silencing that goes on. In other words, if we don't want to share what you're telling us, we're just not going to share it. So looking at that, it shocked me to realize that that's the behavior of a standing committee. And we also, there was an MP, a member of parliament, who took a law forward on trying to make non-state torture a crime. And they had a standing committee meeting, and we were the only two that they asked to speak. And yet we had women who were tortured by non-state actors who were willing to go there and speak, and they were not asked. So I walked away really feeling that we were really placated in the process, because we were so verbal. They had to kind of at least talk to Linda and I, but not really talk. You know, they just wanted to have the showcase there. And it's changed how I see politics greatly. I didn't quite have political cruelty as a framework. So that's what I would add from the experiences in Canada that we've had, because sometimes people want to say, well, it's one party versus the other, but in a standing committee, the House of Commons Standing Committee, there's members from all political parties that can be on it. So when you have unanimous agreement, that means all the political parties are agreeing, and that's pretty well what has happened in our experiences.
Yeah, I mean, I used to be a lobbyist in Brussels on feminist economics, and I found it absolutely horrifying, because I think that quite a lot of the politicians are quite clever and sophisticated in what they're doing, and it's like they'll listen to you and pretend that they're listening and obfuscate, pretend that they're taking on board, and then they have an array of mechanisms to make sure your voice doesn't get heard. And you know, I think they're in a way, they're more conscious of what's going on because of being politicians. So they can't, I mean, I suppose a few of them just really have no idea, but very, very few. Most of them, I think, have heard, and they are aware, and they're choosing to do this work for the patriarchy. So it's even more disgusting when you...
It's very intentional.
Yeah. So yeah, tell us what your experience has been with them.
Well, I mean, it's very intentional, because they even told us, at first people didn't believe non-state torture existed. Then we got to the point they did believe it existed. So then they said, yes, we understand. The government said, we understand non-state torture exists, but it's adequate to call it assault. State torture is an important crime that's delegated for international concerns. They don't say it's for men, but that's what they're saying. It's an important crime. The torture of women and girls is adequate to call it assault or aggravated assault, because it's only in the domestic, right? It's only women and girls. It's not as important as state. So they're very intentional. It's very cruel.
Yeah, it's horrifying. And how have you managed to keep going without being too upset, you know, Linda and Jeanne, without just losing it?
Well, that wall shows. I mean, we're very upset. I've got the silent scream right there. I'm screaming all the time. But I mean, I'm so stubborn, because, whenever anybody told me when I was little that you can't do something, that's the first thing I did. So the more I just become more resilient and more determined, and you know, they're creating a monster here. So good luck on them.
Yeah, I mean, they have a wall over there, and I think we get more laser beam to crash it down. I think because our language keeps developing, because in the book we talk about political cruelty, because the reality is, as women, we can work really hard privately, if you will, because in some ways that's what Linda and I are doing, working privately, and help women heal and recover and have a sense of the world that we live in, which is not very nice. But then we go out into patriarchy and a world that's not very nice. We can't let go of holding patriarchy to account. It has to change. Patriarchy has to shift to equality. There's no other option, because I don't feel hopeless at all. I don't feel that it's impossible, but it's damn well hard, you know, and it's going to be hard. And
Yeah.
our children, Linda and I had the ethical issue when Sarah first came. If we don't do it, who's going to do it? Because there was there was nothing anywhere to help us. So it became an ethical issue too. You know, what do you do? Do you leave it for others to do, or do you put your feet into the mud and just start walking it? And I guess that's how we'll probably die. But there's some success in that, because in 1993, when we realized what was coming, I said to Linda, you know, I'm really worried we'll die with this story. So to me, the book is an absolute gift, because that means I'm not going to die with the story. I mean, the book is only half the story in some ways. There's, you know, we have more to say, but at least we know that young feminists have taken it. You know, it's like, how do you care for young feminists? You know, if you don't share what it is, that the journey you've traveled, to make it better for them. So it is a gift, and I appreciate that, and I feel privileged every day, really.